Good morning, boys and girls from Kids to College. Today we will be making plastic out of milk and vinegar. I know that that seems silly. How do we make plastic out of milk and vinegar? Well, a fun fact is that between 1900 and 1945, milk was commonly used to make different plastic ornaments. So, today we're going to start with just a few simple ingredients. Right now, I have my milk on the stove and we're heating it until it starts to steam. So if I move this, maybe you can see. So I have it on the stove. It's starting to steam. And so that was my 1 cup. I had my one measuring cup. I have my vinegar. It's just white distilled vinegar. I have my milk. Any milk that has fat in it or even 1 to 2% milk will work. I have a strainer that I'm going to use, but if you don't have a strainer, you could also use paper towels, so I'll show you how to do that. And then I have a mug as well as my spoon that we're going to use as our teaspoon. So now that we're at the part in this process that the milk is steaming, because I turned it down a little bit, I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. So we've already used the milk. I'm going to put that aside. We've already used the measuring cup. I'm going to put that aside, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to get our milk, and you're going to want to have an adult with you, okay, when you do this, because it's going to be very hot. So as you see, my milk is steaming. We want it to be a similar temperature to that of maybe hot cocoa when you make hot cocoa. So we want to make sure that we pour this into a heat-resistant cup. So you don't want to use a plastic cup or anything like that. Styrofoam would work or a coffee mug. Okay, and so we're just going to set that aside. So now as the milk is still hot, we're going to add our vinegar. And so it calls for 4 teaspoons of vinegar. And if you don't have a teaspoon, that's okay. You can use a small spoon, okay, and measure it out that way. So we're going to, and I'm going to do this over the cup. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and we should start to see the milk curdle. That's essentially what is happening. And maybe I can get you to see a nice view without spilling it everywhere. Okay, so our milk is starting to curdle at this point, okay? And it's creating our white clumps, our curds, essentially. So one question I have for you is, why do you think the milk forms these curds when it's added to the vinegar? And what do you think that they're made of, okay? So now we're going to mix very carefully with our spoon, okay? And we're just going to do that for a few seconds. So another question is, what happens when the milk and vinegar are mixed together, and why do you think that this is? Okay, so I've stirred, okay, and it's very, very clumpy, and I can tell you that it does not smell very good at all. Okay, all right, so I'm going to take my strainer over to my sink, okay, and I'm going to pour this through, because what we want those curds, we want the clumps in it, we don't want the liquid part. So I'm just going to go right over to my sink real quick, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we have our curds, and you can always double your recipe. I only used 1 cup of milk, but to make more of this, you could use 4 cups of milk and then just add more vinegar. But for the sake of the experiment, and I want to try to get as much of that out as possible, for the sake of the experiment, I simply just did 1 cup, okay? So now we have our curds, and we want to take either a paper towel or a dish rag or something. And we really want to press, okay, very carefully on all of these curds, and we want to get as much excess liquid out that we can. Okay. All right. And then any that's come up on this, I'm going to get out. But as we see, the consistency has now changed. So we've got all of our excess water out, right? All right. So once it's cooled a little bit, right, because it's still a little hot, we see it's steaming a little bit, we're going to want to pick it up and we're going to want to start kneading it, okay? And when we start kneading it, all of the curds are going to come together in a ball. And this is called Kieson plastic, okay? So I'm going to scoop this up so that way you can see. And I am going to start to knead it into a ball like I'm making a little meatball, right? Okay. And so now what needs to happen is we're going to need to let it cool. But I want to add some color to it, right? So you're able to add color. You can add different glitter and different things to decorate it with if you would like. So I'm just going to add a few drops of food coloring to this, okay? And this is where it gets messy, but remember that food coloring always comes out, the same thing that's in cupcakes and cake frosting. So now I'm going to knead this together with the food coloring in it because I want my plastic to be blue, okay? So I'm going to knead that together until it's all distributed throughout and that I have that consistent color throughout, okay? And now this could take up to 48 hours to dry. It may take about 24, all depending on how much you make. But what you're going to see happen is it's going to harden right up. So if you wanted to make this into a shape, you could take a cookie cutter to it. You could flatten it out like that. So whatever way that you want it to come out, once it's dry, is how you're going to want to leave it once you've got it all kneaded together. So I just want mine to be a plastic ball. Okay. So I'm going to make my own little kind of ball that you might find in a ball pit, right? So I'm going to leave that right there. And we're going to have a video in the next couple of days so that way you can see the end result and see the hard plastic, right? How do the kneaded curds feel and look differently than the curds did originally? That's a question I want you to really think about. You know, when we go back and we think that we started out with just these wet, crumbly curds from milk, and now we have this colorful ball that's holding its shape. It's pretty amazing, right? And all we did was add vinegar to milk. So I, we're going to revisit some of those questions that we had, okay? So I'm going to give you a tip real quick, though. So to shape the plastic, the dough has to be kneaded well. That's really important. It has to keep its form. So molds and cookie cutters will work well. You can sculpt it if you would like, food coloring, glitter, other decorative bits, okay? And then once it's dried, you could paint it or color it with markers, but it has to be dried completely before we can do that, okay? So what happened in this science experiment that we just did? What science just occurred? Well, I'm going to tell you. So when you added hot milk to the vinegar, small white chunks should have become visible in the mixture, right? Which we saw. This is because adding an acid like white vinegar, which we've talked quite a bit about in several of our videos, and we've used vinegar in a lot of science experiments. So adding that acidic component to the milk changes the pH of the milk, and it makes that casein molecules unfold and reorganize into a long chain, which curdles the milk. So those white chunks are curds. And you should have been able to use a spoon to separate them from most of the liquid. I used my strainer to do that. You could use cheesecloth. I mean, any way you want to do it. You could scoop it out just with a spoon if you don't have paper towels, cheesecloth, or a strainer, okay? And additionally, drying the curds with the paper towels or your rag, whatever it might be, it should have made them, ready to knead into a ball and use as this case in plastic, which can then be molded and decorated. So as we see, acidic things such as white vinegar have a profound effect on the pH of all things we come in contact with. And when we change the pH of something, we often get a different form of matter, right? So I'm really excited because in just a day or two, we're going to see this little mushy ball, and it's already starting to harden. It's actually kind of like real spongy feeling already. Okay, and it's holding its shape really, really well. So I'm going to leave that, let it dry, and I will revisit it with you in just a couple of days. And I would love to see what yours came out as well. Okay, I hope you have a wonderful day from Kids to College. We have another awesome activity coming up using a lemon, baking soda, and food coloring. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.